The sun beat down on the dusty train station. It was 1886, and the air hummed with the buzz of flies and the distant chug of an approaching locomotive. Alara stood beside a worn leather suitcase, her new calico dress feeling stiff and hot. Her hands, usually busy with needles and thread, now clutched a small, worn purse. She was a mail-order bride, sent to marry a man she'd only seen in a blurry photograph. A knot of worry tightened in her stomach. The station platform smelled of coal smoke and damp wood, a mix that made her nose tingle. Men in broad-brimmed hats walked past, their boots thudding on the wooden planks. The great iron tracks stretched out like ribbons into the dry, brown land. Alara felt very small and very alone. Her heart pounded like a drum. She thought of her quiet home, so far away. The sound of a steam whistle pierced the air, closer now. This was it. Her new life, for better or worse, was about to begin. The approaching train's whistle shrieked, making Alara jump. Just then, a shadow fell over her. A tall man stood nearby, his broad shoulders filling the space. He wore a leather apron, stained with what looked like grease and soot, and his hands were strong and calloused. He was a blacksmith, she guessed, by the smell of iron that clung to him. His eyes, though, were what caught her attention. They were kind, and they looked at her with a knowing sadness. This was Silas. He had been watching Alara for a while, ever since she arrived, looking so out of place in her stiff new dress. He saw the worry lines on her forehead and the way her fingers trembled around her purse. He knew that look. He'd seen other mail-order brides pass through this station, some happy, some clearly not. Alara looked truly scared. A sudden, strong feeling told him he had to do something. He couldn't let her go to a life she didn't want. A bold, risky idea sparked in his mind. He would help her. The train roared to a stop, its massive wheels hissing. People hurried past, pushing and pulling luggage. Silas moved closer to Alara, pretending to adjust a loose strap on her suitcase. His strong fingers brushed hers, and in that fleeting moment, something smooth and cool was pressed into her palm. Alara looked down, her eyes widening. It was a train ticket, folded neatly. But the destination was different from the one she had been given. This one read Silver Creek. Her original ticket was for Willow Creek. Silas gave her a quick, almost invisible nod, his kind eyes urging her to understand without words. He had been quick, quiet, and clever. He'd slipped the ticket to her, while everyone was distracted by the bustling arrival. This new ticket, she realized, was her chance. It was a new path, far away from the man she was supposed to marry, a stranger she dreaded. Her heart fluttered with a mix of fear and a tiny spark of hope. Silas moved away then, melting back into the crowd, leaving Alara with the secret of her new journey. The paper felt crisp and cool in Alara's palm, a stark contrast to the clammy nervousness that had gripped her moments before. Her fingers closed around the folded ticket, her mind racing. Silver Creek. She had never heard of it, but it sounded like freedom. She glanced up, searching for Silas in the crowd. He was leaning against a post, watching her, a faint, secret smile playing on his lips. His eyes twinkled with a quiet victory. In that brief look, Alara understood. He hadn't just swapped a ticket. He had offered her a choice, a way out. He had seen her fear and acted, without a word, without a promise, simply with a kind heart. A strange warmth spread through her, pushing back against the cold dread. This man, a stranger just moments ago, had done something truly important for her. She knew, deep down, that she could trust him. The noise of the station, the shouts of the porters, the hiss of the train, it all faded. All that mattered was the paper in her hand and the silent understanding between her and the kind blacksmith. The conductor's voice boomed, "All aboard." Alara felt a surge of panic. She gripped her suitcase, her eyes scanning the crowd. Then, Silas was there again, his hand gently but firmly on her arm. He didn't speak, just guided her with a slight nod toward a different train car than the one she was originally meant for. The steam from the engine billowed around them, a thick, white cloud that swirled and hissed, wrapping them in a temporary, welcome cloak of invisibility. Silas helped her up the steep steps. Her wool skirt brushed against the rough wood of the car entrance, a familiar scratchy feeling. Inside, the seats were hard and worn, but they felt like a haven. He placed her suitcase on the rack above. For a moment, their eyes met again. His held a quiet assurance, a promise of safety. He then turned and slipped off the train just as the whistle blew a final, ear-splitting blast. With a jolt, the train began to move, slowly at first, then picking up speed. Alara watched Silas disappear into the dissipating steam, her new ticket clutched tight in her hand. She was on her way. The train rattled and swayed, carrying Alara further and further from her old life. To her surprise, Silas reappeared a few stops later, joining her in the quiet car. He must have boarded a different part of the train, or perhaps even another train, just to make sure she was truly safe. The hours melted into days as the landscape outside the window changed from familiar farmlands to endless, rolling plains. Silas talked, his voice a low rumble that was comforting to Alara. He spoke of the wild frontier, a place of wide-open spaces and big, blue skies. He painted pictures with his words, tall mountains, roaring rivers, and towns where folks built their own destinies. "It's a place for new chances, Alara," he said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "A place where you can be whoever you want to be." Alara listened, a mix of fear and excitement swirling inside her. The unknown was scary, but the thought of a fresh start, a life chosen by her, was a sweet melody. She watched the endless land rush by, feeling the train's gentle rock, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of true hope. Finally, the train slowed, groaning to a halt in a small, sleepy town. This wasn't a grand city, but a collection of wooden buildings clustered around a dirt main street. The air was dry and smelled of pine and dust. Silas helped Alara down, her feet sinking slightly into the soft earth. The station here was just a shed, and the platform barely more than a few planks. They walked away from the tracks, past a general store and a saloon, their boots crunching on the loose dirt. Silas led her to the edge of town, where a few scattered cabins stood. He stopped in front of one, smaller than the rest, with a sagging porch and a single window. "This is it," he said, pushing open the creaky wooden door. Inside, the cabin was empty, save for a thin layer of dust covering everything. Sunlight streamed through cracks in the walls, painting stripes on the dirt floor. It was clear that no one had lived here for a long time. It needed a lot of work. The roof looked shaky, and there was no furniture, just bare logs and a stone fireplace. Alara looked around, not with disappointment, but with a strange sense of possibility. This empty space felt like a blank page, ready for a new story. The very next morning, Silas and Alara began the hard work of making the cabin a home. Silas, with his strong hands and knowledge of building, showed Alara how to mend the roof. The sounds of their work filled the quiet cabin. The rhythmic thud-thud of Silas's hammer, the scrape of Alara's broom, and sometimes a small grunt of effort from either of them. They didn't talk much during these times, but a quiet rhythm grew between them. Alara found a strange joy in the simple, honest work, watching the cabin slowly transform. Each nail driven, each board cleaned, felt like a step further into her new, chosen life. As the days turned into weeks, the cabin slowly took shape. And as the cabin took shape, so did the friendship between Alara and Silas. They started talking more, not just about the work, but about their lives. Alara learned that Silas had left his family back east to seek his fortune, but he often sent them money. He spoke of his younger sister, and Alara could hear the love in his voice. She saw his kind heart, not just in his actions, but in his quiet words. Silas, in turn, discovered Alara's spirit. She might have seemed fragile at first, a city girl far from home, but she had a fire inside her. She never complained about the hard work, and her quick mind often found clever ways to solve problems, like how to properly hang a curtain with only a few nails and a piece of twine. He saw her strong will, her quiet courage. Sometimes, a shared task would lead to a burst of laughter, like the time Alara accidentally painted her nose with whitewash. Other times, they would work in comfortable silence, the only sounds being the tools and the wind outside. They were building more than a cabin. They were building a bond, strong and true, brick by quiet brick. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the newly built porch, watching the sun dip below the distant hills. The air was cool and peaceful. Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver pocket watch. It wasn't fancy, but it gleamed in the fading light. He clicked it open, and a soft, rhythmic tick-tock filled the silence. "My father gave me this," he said, his voice a little softer than usual. Said a man always needs to know the time, especially when he's building something new. He looked out at the horizon, a thoughtful look on his face. "You know, Alara, I've always dreamed of having my own blacksmith shop. A place where I can work with iron, make things with my own hands. Back east, it was just a dream. But out here in this new land, it feels different." He glanced at her, a spark in his eyes. "I see a spot in town, near the water pump, that would be perfect. I could build a forge, hammer out horseshoes, mend tools for the farmers. Maybe even make pretty ironwork for the homes." His words painted a clear picture, a future he was reaching for. Alara listened, captivated by the quiet strength of his dream. Alara listened to Silas, her gaze following his to the fading horizon. His dream was so clear, so strong. It made her think about her own quiet longings, feelings she had barely dared to whisper to herself. "I never really had a dream like that," she began, her voice soft, "not one that felt like my own." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "All I ever truly wanted was a place where I felt safe. A place where I could be happy, really happy, without always worrying about what someone else wanted me to be or do." She thought of the cold, formal house she had left and the future that had been mapped out for her. "I never thought I could have that. It always seemed like something other people had, not me." She looked at Silas, his silhouette outlined by the last light of the day. "But now," she continued, a shy smile playing on her lips, "being here with you, building this cabin, it feels different. It feels like this could be that place. Like I could truly be safe and happy here." Her words hung in the air, a fragile hope given voice. It was a dream not of grand things, but of simple, precious peace, and in Silas's presence, it felt wonderfully real. With renewed purpose, Silas and Alara began to build the small forge. It was simpler than the grand shop Silas dreamed of, just a sturdy stone structure with a bellows and an anvil. But it was a start. Alara helped gather stones and mix the clay for the hearth. Her hands, once soft and white, were now strong and capable, stained with the earth. As dusk settled, Silas lit the first fire in the forge. The flames danced, casting warm, orange light onto their faces and the surrounding darkness. The air filled with the smell of wood smoke and hot metal. He picked up a piece of raw iron, placing it into the glowing coals. When it turned cherry red, he pulled it out with tongs and began to hammer it on the anvil. Asterisk clang, clang, clang. Asterisk the sound echoed through the quiet evening. Alara watched him, mesmerized. The muscles in his arms rippled with each powerful strike. The way he handled the heavy tools, the way he bent the stubborn metal to his will, it showed his immense strength. But more than that, she saw the care in his movements, the gentle way he adjusted the metal, the quiet satisfaction in his eyes as he shaped it. She knew this forge was his dream, and she also knew, with a certainty that warmed her heart, that he was building this new life, in part, for her. The fire glowed, warm and bright, a beacon in the frontier night. Days folded into weeks, and then weeks into months. The small cabin, once empty and dusty, was now filled with the warmth of a fire and the quiet hum of a shared life. They settled into a gentle rhythm. Mornings brought the smell of coffee and the sounds of Silas getting ready for the forge. Evenings were for simple meals shared at a small, handmade table. Sometimes, Alara would read from a worn book she had brought, her voice soft in the stillness. After supper, they often sat outside, wrapped in blankets, watching the vast, star-filled sky. The stars out here were unlike anything Alara had ever seen, bright and countless like spilled diamonds. Silas would point out constellations, telling her old stories he'd heard. In these quiet moments, a feeling, soft and persistent, began to grow in Alara's heart. It wasn't the sudden, fiery passion she read about in books, but a deep, comforting warmth, like the embers of a good fire. It was a feeling of belonging, of being truly seen and cared for. She found herself watching Silas, his strong profile silhouetted against the night sky, and a quiet certainty settled within her. This was where she was meant to be, with him. Silas had watched Alara change, day by day, like a flower opening to the sun. The nervous, frightened girl from the train station was gone, replaced by a brave, capable woman. He saw the strength in her hands as she pounded nails, the kindness in her eyes as she spoke to the few neighbors they'd met, and the quiet joy she found in making their little cabin a home. She never complained, even when things were hard, and her spirit shone bright, even on the darkest days. He realized his feelings for her had grown far beyond simply wanting to help her escape a bad situation. He admired her, respected her, and found himself smiling just at the thought of her. He loved the way she hummed when she cooked, the way her brow furrowed in concentration when she was learning something new, and the soft, warm feeling that settled in his chest whenever she looked at him. Silas knew, with a certainty that hummed through him like the ringing of his anvil, that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Alara. He wanted to build their future together, not just his blacksmith shop. She wasn't just someone he had helped. She was the woman he wanted to share everything with in this wild, new land. One sunny afternoon, they were planting a small garden behind the cabin, turning over the rich, dark earth. Alara was carefully placing a bean seed into the soil when Silas reached out and gently took her hand, stopping her work. His fingers, strong and callous from the forge, were surprisingly soft as they held hers. Alara looked up, her heart giving a little flutter. His eyes, usually so serious, held a tenderness that made her breath catch. "Alara," he began, his voice a low, steady rumble that somehow filled the quiet air between them. "I know this isn't how things usually happen. We met in a strange way." He paused, looking out at the wide, open land that was slowly becoming their home. "But I can't imagine this life without you in it anymore," he continued, turning his gaze back to her. "You're brave and kind, and you make this place feel like home. I want to stay with you, always, to build our life together, right here in this new place." His words were simple, honest, and filled with a deep, true feeling. Alara felt a wave of warmth wash over her, a feeling more comforting and powerful than any fire. She squeezed his hand gently. A slow, tender smile spread across Alara's face, lighting up her eyes. The fear, the worry, the feeling of being unwanted, all the shadows of her past life melted away like morning mist. She had been searching for safety, for happiness, and here it was, right in Silas's strong, gentle hand. "I feel the same, Silas," she whispered, her voice barely a breath, but clear as a bell in the quiet afternoon. Her fingers tightened around his, a promise given without grand words. "More than the same. This is home. You are home." They sat there for a long moment, hands clasped, the rich scent of earth and the distant ringing of Silas's forge filling the air. The wild frontier stretched out around them, vast and full of challenges, but also full of promise. They had faced the unknown together, improvised safety, and found a quiet, escalating intimacy that had blossomed into something beautiful and real. They had escaped a forced past, and, in doing so, had found a new beginning. Not just for themselves, but for them. A life built on kindness, courage, and a deep, unspoken love, ready to grow in the wide open spaces of their own choosing.